Caught between tradition and modernity, my quest to be an authentic and useful yoga teacher in today's time. My mission as a teacher in today's time has been to find a way to teach yoga that remains traditional but is useful and adaptable to the student. And so this has had much to do with how I have evolved my teaching style and a constant catch-22. I've often come to question my faith in how yoga is now taught, my purpose as a teacher, and my beliefs and understandings of the practice after studying scriptures and at the same time living in a very different world to the era that produced them. This is especially poignant living in a non-Hindu society where worship and devotion to God is not as common as in other parts of the world. Perhaps instead people have more belief in themselves as individuals, but sadly self-importance and belief may lead to separation amongst us, or worse, competition, jealousy, greed, ego. Did we forget how to be humble? Trust something greater than ourselves. I've often felt torn and confused at how the word tradition seems to suggest obedience, rigidity, blind faith, and something set in stone. Whereas the natural world we live in and its societies are constantly evolving and changing. Not wanting to be too generic or wishy-washy, yet not strict and rigid in my teaching, I believe I've developed a style that is built upon the core healthy yoga techniques and the Ashtanga 8-limbed philosophy, which I strive to transmit in a caring, encouraging and approachable way. I believe that as modern yoga teachers, aka representatives of yoga or guides, we have a responsibility to remain true to the root teachings of the yogic philosophy and at the same time welcome all without prejudice. We must hold a beneficial space and offer a safe learning environment where students may learn about themselves through their bodies and hopefully learn the fundamental techniques and tools which will guide them ever onwards or upwards along the yogic path if they wish to take it. Who do I teach? The modern students. So I've been teaching across studios as well as privately in London for almost 4 years. I mostly teach Ashtanga, Vinyasa and Yin classes. I'm trained to teach Ashtanga, Yin and Power, funnily enough. And through my self-study, I continuously learn by means of yoga texts and scriptures, workshops, lectures, online courses, and other online offerings and materials. I study both contemporary and classic materials and teachers, including the work of today's most experienced teachers in the Ashtanga discipline, including many of the Ashtanga elders, the wise yogis. The most important learning, of course, is carried out on the mat by asking questions, seeking truths, and through conversations with my students, fellow yogis, and even friends and family. So unlike in other eras where yoga was practiced mostly by holy men, ascetics, spiritual seekers, or the sick seeking a cure, nowadays yoga is popular and readily accessible to all. Yoga's had to evolve to be practical and relevant to all of those who come. The class, that you can read more about this in my Raja Yoga blog series. The classes I teach in studios in London are attended by many different types of people who come to yoga for many different reasons, with varying levels of ability and also commitment. Although rooted in a very traditional practice of Ashtanga Vinyasa, the students who I teach do not practice in the traditional way. That is, they do not practice 6 days a week. They do not learn one-to-one. They may not have a self-practice, let alone a mindful self-practice, that this lineage is known for. They mostly also practice a range of styles with different teachers and probably at different studios or in different formats. So it's fair to say many modern studios do not have the traditional fixed personal practice in place. Many yoga students now have many other interests and responsibilities, right? They may not be frequent to class, they may not practice a single style, they may not wish to do the spiritual self-inquiry work that lays behind the posture yoga practice. They may not care about perfecting their asana practice or even having a good posture practice of being able to do a chaturanga. They may just wish to touch the toes. They may just want to simply move and breathe and forget about their troubles for an hour. And this is okay. There's a lot of release and physical and psychological calming that comes just from being told what to do for an hour, from not having to think for an hour, right? There are benefits and downfalls to this, but what is clear is that my dharma seems to be to make the method and its techniques accessible to the students of our modern society who are outside of the traditional way of learning, for whatever reason they come, and then to inspire them to keep coming. I myself am mostly self-taught. Having begun the practice alone, I continue to be a lone home self-practitioner. The challenge of teaching the modern mixed level group-led class, favoured in today's Western society. Traditionally, we've said a student would be devoted to a guru and prescribed a personal practice by them relevant to their needs. Nowadays, there are millions of students and far too few gurus. You can read more about this in my other blog, Dabbling in the Dark. There are also many ways to study, remotely, online, through books, YouTube, podcasts, workshops. Today's yoga scene in the West means that I am mostly always required to teach mixed level classes at studios with students varying age groups, ailments, fitnesses, sex, size, mental attitude, reasons for practicing. There's just millions of unlimitless variables in the room when I'm teaching. So this has meant that I've had to find the way to be a useful and effective teacher of this generic class while still respecting yoga tradition on one hand and the individuality of the students' needs on the other. This has been my greatest challenge, especially as an Ashtanga Vinyasa practitioner, a style that is known for its correct method. Mataria believed that the student should be more important than the teacher, words from his son Desikasha, and that yoga be valid, useful, practical and beneficial. Like most teachers of our time, I've studied the work of this great man and also his context. So this man was in a pivotal place and time to revive and modernize Hatha Yoga for the modern world. I firmly believe that yoga traditions and methods must evolve to meet the modern student and the modern world, yet not so far as to move too far away from the true essence of yoga, Raja Yoga. Let's resist the temptation of doing yoga poses to please and impress ourselves. It is known that yoga has evolved and changed in many ways in the recent decades. And this is wonderful as it brings people to the mat and has made yoga come to be globally accepted and even trendy. Yet it is important to remember why we do it, why we really do it. If nowadays we need a yoga that is visually exciting, dynamic, expressive and fun to enrapture our busy minds, and draw us onto the mat, so be it. Sure, we must start somewhere, but then we move on. We move inwards. I remind students that yoga poses and classes are only the doorway to something much greater. The quiet approach. In class, I try more and more to step back rather than interfere these days, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic this year. I feel my role is to guide the students and gently keep them on track and focused as they do their work, rather than instruct or spoon-feed yoga poses or instructions every moment through the yoga poses. I aim to guide students calmly and safely through the class and offer just enough support when required as they learn to support and take responsibility for themselves out there, or in there. It is said that wisdom must be learnt by experience, else it's just words, right? I've been said to be fair and firm, but not strict or rigid in my approach. I will encourage students and offer kindness, but not so much as to risk them losing focus or wandering off the track. That is, the mind goes somewhere and they're not in the practice. This is my greatest fear as I teach the students. Then the bubbles burst and the transcendence is gone. So too much thinking or pause time in class and I will lead us on again. My typical Ashtanga or Vinyasa class is slower, softer or quieter than what many expect. Students might say my classes are calming or grounding, and this is how I feel the practice is supposed to be. We're not supposed to end up burnt out or excited after the class is finished. Often Ashtanga and Vinyasa, that is dynamic, classes are taught too fast or too loud. They're too dynamic, there's too much noise, there's too much exuberance. This could be with too much talking, too much creativity, too much music, basically not enough time or space for the students to focus inwardly. And it's very important to me to provide enough quiet. I don't like to offer constant instructions or cueing, even though I really want to help and provide every piece of knowledge I can in every moment to help them. That's not the way, and it's been really hard actually to not take the approach of having to help all the time. So yeah, I might use a different sequence or a sound or a mantra or a carefully selected playlist, but only not really so that it overpowers or has sway in the class, just so that it's maybe just in the back of the subconscious. I feel the balance is delicate. Remember that pratyahara means to gather the senses, and they're then turned inwards to progress to dharana, this relaxed focus. So to have them roaming the room, focusing on sounds and instructions, always needed for an unknown sequence. Your mind is constantly fixed to the teacher and their voice. And also, maybe you're trying to please the teacher or please yourself or please the other practitioners in the room. So this actually all works in the opposite way to what we're trying to achieve in yoga. So by stimulating the mind and senses and keeping them outwards, they're not able to go inwards, where they ought to be calming down and drawing you within. So I've done classes before where I've been stressed out or there was so much cueing that it was really useful if it had been a workshop and a learning environment, but I didn't have any flow, there was no breath, there was no fluidity, and I actually ended up missing that and wanting that and becoming angry because I wasn't left alone to feel my practice. I was studying it in every moment. And also when you're given something to do every second, you kind of get this feeling that the work's never done, like everything you do isn't good enough. There's something else to do, something else to do. And you feel like you're not actually doing it right because there's always something more to do, right? Oh, I've had this. Over the years, I've managed to tame this desire, exactly, to help so much with constant cueing and instruction. So we've said too much bombardment can cause confusion or stress, or just overcomplicate the matter, make mountains out of molehills. I've had to let go of some of the natural tendency I have to control and actually give the control to the students. So I think Zoom has been a good lesson for us teachers, that sometimes it's good to step back and let the students, look after themselves. It's necessary to give students this headspace and stillness to stay in their own personal experience of the practice. If not, whose practice is it? Mine or theirs? So I have to keep myself constantly in check with this, because I naturally want to share, as many of us do, all of our knowledge and help as much as I can. I recently did a class on YouTube for fun, and I felt like this she was a lovely person, but in this particular class, it was like she had this urge to download every single piece of yogic knowledge and wisdom and information and technique that she had into this one class, and it was quite stressful. But would have been fine if I was sat there taking it as a lecture or a satsang, right? So, we come to yoga to relax, not to get stressed. And if this is the type of practice, so if you prefer a type of practice with lots of verbal instruction and constant cueing, then I'm not your teacher. In a generic group class, I will not overcomplicate instructions or offer minutely precise anatomical details, as these I feel are not useful for a group as a whole to hear and can actually cause harm, especially when regarding the hip joints, so positions of feet. I do my best to save these details and technical advice for instructional offerings. Maybe it's a video I make for YouTube or my IGTV, or it's a one-to-one with a student, or a class where I'm just teaching, very few people, or the workshops. So it's crucial to draw the line between teaching yoga and practicing yoga. That is between teaching how to do the physicality and the technicality of the practice, and then allowing the students to feel the practice in motion through experience. But these are two different concepts. So this is the workshop versus the flow class. It's like the Iyengar versus the Ashtanga. If we're being taught, then we're using the mind. But if we're practicing, then we aim to let go of the mind and its thinking. We aim to surrender to a flow and transcend that flow to the feeling, to the state of yoga. So both are important, of course, for a consistent practice and a safe practice, actually. Just to study an actual experience or knowledge and wisdom go hand in hand. I believe that, I've come to accept that if students, this is how I feel, if students come to a 1 hour class, I have them for 1 hour and I have to choose which of these I'm going to teach, then I choose to give them the opportunity to experience the release of the state of yoga, the transcendence, the conscious shift. I think this far outweighs the importance of perfecting and improving technique, which comes over time and practice anyway. It's always the same poses, right? So it's very beneficial to let students simply enjoy breath, body and movement without getting too caught up in the details or the drama of it? Can we as teachers let them just be in their breath, in their moment? I say this because many of our modern daily Western lives are full to the brim. And rarely do people get a chance to feel so relaxed, carefree, so peaceful, to focus on one thing at a time, to move away from the world and all of its stimulants. So for me as a teacher, as long as the students stay quiet and calm and centered on the breath in the present moment, the posture itself, I can sacrifice its perfection. It becomes less relevant to me. Rather, it is a place where this inward-looking yoga arises. Beginners and offering help. So beginners classes remain unpopular. And most of us, including myself, end up hitting the mat running in a mixed levels class with no time to work out what we're doing in our bodies or how to get the stamina and strength to survive the class. Of course, we all know that most of us begin this way, but my heart goes out to these new students. I encourage beginners to investigate how their bodies work and function as chains, to start at the beginning at the feet, especially regarding the relation of feet positions to steer the hips and spine correctly. Okay, just look at your feet, guys, if you're new. I really do believe in the logic of the Ashtanga standing sequence. It safely teaches students to learn about their bodies and what they can or cannot do according to the limitations. So you have no idea how a pose should feel, or how to get in or how to get out, or what your own variation of the pose is according to how open your hips are, for example. Most of this is to do with hips. You learn what you can and can't do, and learn where your place is within the development of that pose, on the 2 feet, with the spaciousness provided by the standing sequence, right? We also learn equilibrium, weight distribution, opposition forces, stability, strength, just in these standing poses. Flexibility comes over time, of course, but here on 2 feet rather than folded on the floor, where we're already in half inflection, students have time, more space and the confidence to get to grips with these first asana lessons, which build calm too, as well as strength. Anyone can begin in Samastiti, and in this first posture alone, a lot of yogic awareness can be found. A lot of yoga can be done here. Me and David Gurrick here are a big fan of the beauty of Samastiti. So I prefer to offer tailored individual help to students if they're struggling. That is, if they're stressed, maybe the breath isn't there, or they're at risk of putting their body, mostly the spine, in a harmful position. I put myself in their shoes. I remember how it is to begin the practice. I share a smile with them or a laugh. I'll give them a little tip here or there and encourage them. Tell them it's not that important. Just accept and enjoy yourself as you start your yoga practice. It's important to make beginners feel at home and welcome. And I remind them that nobody is a natural at yoga. It will always be a challenge. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to need all of your skill. It's never going to be perfect. You're never going to complete yoga. The work is never ending, and that's the beauty of it. There's no need to rush. If I demonstrate, I'd rather do it discreetly and not break that crucial flow. Unless it's a pose where everyone seems to do the wrong variation of it. Pavrita Volkanasana, for example. I might get down on the floor and quickly break the flow seamlessly as quickly as I can, and then just send them onwards to do the work. If I need to provide a modification, I make sure that it's not a variation, like I've just said, A lot of weird things arise when people practice lots of different styles or have favourites. They might want to bash those out, when in fact they'll work in a completely different part of the body or in a different way to the use and the purpose of the pose. So making sure that variations, modifications, are still having the same effect as the original or the intended posture. I believe that the depth or full expression of the posture is far inferior to the integrity and cleanliness of the posture. My aim is to encourage students to work the breath on the edges of the posture. Patanjali writes about this in the sutras. There's a little piece that says that the magic, the yoga, happens when you reach the edge and then you have the grace to come back from the edge a little bit and then apply your effort and attention. And to expand and accept the posture slowly. In this way, we overcome any unwanted mental struggle, bodily stress, and anchor into the growth sensation. Yoga is skill in action. Keep quoting this guy here. Focus on universality. Is that a word? So as I have said, I fully believe that ancient yoga hatha techniques should still be respected and brought into every single asana class if we are truly wanting to reap the rewards of hatha yoga. That is a healthy body, mind and spirit through its practice. A posture practice should increase health by warming the blood so that it circulates well, liven up the digestive system, remove excess fat and toxins from the body, strengthen muscle, joints and bone, balance and calm the nervous system, and overall make us feel happy and good. Krishnamacharya simplified the ancient systems, which were sometimes esoteric, fanciful, and quite often imaginative, sometimes harmful. These were complex practices of kriyas and pranayamas, cleansing, breathing techniques. He focused us on fewer techniques, which we considered more useful, universal, and safe. However, he gave us more postures, remember, so these fewer techniques are the core of all of these millions of postures and moving postures that we now have. Okay? They're built around these to facilitate the work, the cleansing and the balancing work of this breath and kriya. Okay? Breath, bandha and drishti, the gazing place, can be easily understood and practiced by all. And unlike our body shapes and bones, they are universally experienced in the same way. And so these are the tools that are used to guide students. So Ashtanga Vinyasa is known for this. Its teachers focus on the energetic concept and feeling of the body and the flow of energy, the sensation of this energy and building and steering and directing, and it's all about energy. So rather than attempting to perfect 25 students in a room doing Warrior 1, visually or anatomically, I will encourage them to feel the pose through the experience of the sensations of these inner techniques. We all feel the same inner shapes and feelings as we inhale and exhale. We all feel this wave, this ocean, this curling, unfolding inhale, dragging, sucking, contraction of exhale. Okay? It's simply air coming in and air going out. And we can shape and steer and compress and use this shape in the internal body in the same way. We all have a spine, we all have a psoas, we all have a diaphragm and pelvic floor that connect in the same way, no matter what's going on in the superficial layer of the body. Okay? We must tap into this rhythm as well, or we risk getting lost in our busy minds and empty, dull postures. Postures must breathe. They must feel alive, ever-changing and new, even if it's a triangle pose we've done 1,000 times. The great work, breath, spine, drishti. Hatha Yoga continues the mission of Tantra Yoga, from which it was born, of activating the energy of the central channel or Sushumna. Since I began my yoga practice, I've always been greatly influenced by the teachings of David Garib, who always emphasizes this important work of the Hatha Yoga spine in his teachings. And so it's become an integral part of my personal practice and teaching style as I constantly remind students to be aware of their spinal positions. I love to share my knowledge and passion for the physical and energetic anatomy and effect of the bandhas. In class, my students will learn that bandhas are not mystical or impossible, that they are real and tangible. I guide them to bandhas through correct timing and breathing. It's not so tricky, really. It's just the following of the breath and the timing of the feelings of the parts of the breath. Going to those places with the breath. I love to see our students transform their practice once they are set on working with the bandhas. The focus and attention to detail that arises is beautiful, and their practice becomes efficient and smooth. The beauty of Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga is the seamless flow of constant moving energy through the practice. If you aim not to waste any of it, through the eyes, through the senses, extra thoughts, extra movements, then the practice takes on a whole new level. These concepts require great focus and skill to master, and interestingly, they could be called invisible or intangible, working deep inside the body's core. So it may be difficult to teach through words, but I believe that I can absolutely lead the students to feel them for themselves. I've written about the tangible way to feel the untangible, or the way to give the formless form, in another blog. You can check that out. So the other great work is the breathing. Anyone can do Ujjayi breath. Beginners walk into the room and within 5-10 minutes they're hearing this sound, and the mind kind of wants to be part of that sound and starts to mimic this sound. It's called a psychic breath. Once you learn it, it kind of just spontaneously arises, and it's actually quite hard to turn it off at the end of practice. So it's a breath that's easily learnt, and anyone can do it. Okay, so this is why, again, we focus on breath, spine, bandha, because it's something we all have in common. There's no need to decorate the technique or imagine or visualize or treat it even a different way in everybody. These mechanisms are more or less universal. The art of non-attachment. Rather than focus, well, this is about me, isn't it? The art of non-attachment, the art of not wanting to share every technique and cue and piece of help I can give at all times, is also an art of non-attachment, of stepping back, of surrendering, of letting things be. So rather than focus on them perfecting their postures, I'm trying to encourage the students to think of postures as offering different scenarios that evoke different emotions, reactions, problems. I'll remind them to notice that which arises. And then, now this is something I didn't quite grasp in the beginning when I was a new yoga teacher or practitioner. Don't analyze what comes up. That's the mind. The human mind wants to analyze and label and sift through and organize all of this kind of, I want to call it debris, but all this stuff that comes up through the rubble as you practice. Trauma, past experience, memories. A lot of people experience a whole kind of a different array of things. So instead of doing the work the mind wants to do, which is analyze it, accept it, and let it go. This is difficult work. So the art of surrender is part of the yoga path, and it paves the way to a more peaceful way of living in the world beyond the mat. On the mat, the variables, the distractions and scenarios are much more controlled than out there. And so it provides this safe and quiet space where the student learns to handle themselves mentally, giving them the power to keep their emotions and thoughts and actions in check, to watch them instead of becoming them, which is where the yogi gets this evading sense of calm. We still feel emotions, see them, watch them, hear them. We're still part of the world. We're still doing, moving, feeling. We're not numb. We still enjoy watching the changes. But somehow there's a little barrier, right, between our self that we don't want to disturb its peace, and then our other self, which can experience all the changes. There's kind of this like duo of us within. Anyway, this is getting a bit complex here, sorry. So the Ashtanga practice is beautiful because it offers a vinyasa between poses. You get to forget about one and start again with a clean slate on the other. If you've ever tried to practice, maybe you're tired one day and you do less vinyasas, you might notice that your mind does wander off, or practice becomes heavier because your mind gets fuller, right? And also, as you start again, you have this neutral position. Okay, Samastiti, Dadasana, all these places offer you a reset kind of emotionally as well. Sitting on the center, feeling the calm before you start again to enter a new experience. And of course, this is why no matter what shape the body is, size you are, which ability you come with, there'll always be postures that you will like, dislike, enjoy, loathe, love, the ones that make you wince, feel stupid. I don't know if you've been watching my long journey of, it's Garba Pindasana, isn't it? Anyway, my back doesn't like to round, so there's always going to be these positions where I just feel a complete dork. But maybe that's the lesson, to get over ourselves and do those things we want to avoid, just to break through our comfort zones. The 8 limbs in practice. Hatha yoga is only one path to Raja yoga, the yoga of yogas, if you will, or better said, the state of yoga, the destination, samadhi. Most of us begin our path on the 3rd limb of this method, which is asana, the posture, and through its work we learn the first 2 limbs of yama and niyama. This is the learning to observe and change our behaviour and our attitudes towards ourselves and others. So I believe that asana is a great place to start, as it engages our minds, bodies, senses, and directs them into we don't even realise we're doing it, but it grabs them all and projects them into the focused work of the skill needed to arrange ourselves and get ourselves through our physical practice of postures. I see the next limbs of pranayama, breath control, and pratyahara, sense control, as a bridge between the external limbs, which are said to be the first 4, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and the higher internal limbs of pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, if you count samadhi. These naturally arise as we get comfortable and stable within the asana practice. Dharana is a constant, fixed yet relaxed tension, and dhyana is when this becomes effortless. when it feels as though it's a meditation. The last limb is not really a limb truly, but the state itself of samadhi or Raja Yoga, complete supportless freedom, a bliss of the heart, an openness, and just a pure sense of being. And do you know what? I believe that absolutely everyone who comes, no matter what their ability, if they put the work in and keep doing it, can achieve this state of yoga. A modern Ashtanga Vinyasa teaching style. An anomaly or a modernity, I've come to realise that perhaps I'm a new generation of teacher. Maybe I'm the ugly duck, maybe I'm the black sheep, maybe I got it wrong. That is, I'm a teacher still rooted in the tradition because I believe that the practice method works. I've experienced it for myself. But I'm also so sensitive to the individual bodies and the variables of the students that I teach. And like I've said, they don't practice in the traditional way. They might not have the strength, the stamina, the flexibility, the mental resilience to do it the traditional way. We live in a scientific, technological era. I've written ear here, which is quite funny. And we understand the body and its functions far more than when this practice was put together. Okay. It can be understood that repetition is not good for the body, and I myself still have things that arise due to this. I have a clicking hip at the moment, so it's put a little kind of, a little black cloud over my practice, if you will. So the practical approach to the sequence must be found by each practitioner. It's not necessarily to really alter the original practice so much, but just understand what we do there. So already many older practitioners are taking the softer approach. Teachers not on the official Ashtanga Vinyasa list or register of Sharat are no longer shunned or judged, by people these days. And they're finding ways of making their own, and many people are finding their own personal ways of making the practice work for them this year, especially because of COVID-19. So all these shallow practitioners have had to practice at home. Maybe even a lone practice or a self-practice without a teacher online, or perhaps they did have an online shala there. People seem less attached to the lineage and yet more attached to the yoga. Many of my students have commented how this year the reasons they practice have changed, and in the way in which they do the practice also. Instead of answering technical questions about inversions or arm balances, or questions like how long did it take you to jump back, I am discussing experiences of personal, spiritual and emotional growth with the students.